The following short stories are an excerpt of 40 half-minute tales of horror, written by Olivia Ellis, one of our winners from the Halloween competition last year, taken from Nightmare Massacre, now available for purchase on Kindle and paperback. Memories. Have you ever walked into a room with a monster in it? A horrible creature straight from the darkest corners of your mind. One that snarls and shows its long, curved fangs, like a beast about to strike. The kind that terrifies you to the point that all you can do is freeze in place as the horrible thing stalks forward. Has your heart started racing, although your legs refuse to? Have you shuddered as it lays a hand on your head? Have you felt a sinking blackness as you discover it does not plan on eating you? For you see, not all monsters eat the flesh of humans. Some feed on your memories. Well, have you? Of course not. So let me rephrase that question. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly forgotten why you came in? Just a theory. You know how people who have near-death experiences say that their life flashed before their eyes? Well, this is true. And there's also an interesting explanation behind it. Your mind cannot handle large amounts of stress. I think it's safe to say that dying would be a pretty stressful event. Because of the stress you are put under, your mind looks for things to distract itself with. Due to the circumstances, the only distraction it can find is your memories. Now here's where it gets interesting. We relive our whole life the second before we die. However, after we die, the brain is still active for 7 minutes. In just 1 minute, you go through 60 lives. After 7 minutes, you've gone through 420 different lives. So this begs the question. Right now, are you living your own life? Or are you just one of the lives that someone else is living as they die? "12:59. The man screamed as the woman tore apart his skin. Her long, dead nails raked across him as the clock said 1. Then he woke up, relieved to find it had just been a dream. Then he looked over at his clock. It said it was 12:59. And then he heard the closet door creak open. Green crayon. 30 years ago, my parents bought their first house. It was a cheap price with no insects, mold or rats, and in a good neighbourhood. About a week after the purchase, the neighbours came over with a housewarming gift. After talking for a while, the couple told my parents that the last people to live in the house had moved out after a nasty divorce. They had lost their second baby to SIDS, and their relationship had basically gone downhill after that. My parents were horrified, especially my mother, who was currently pregnant with me. Eventually, they forgot about the issue and focused their energy on fixing up my nursery. One of the first things they did was to peel up the floral wallpaper, as they planned to replace it with fresh paint. My father told my mother to let him do the closet, but she insisted. As she knelt down, peeling up the old paper, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Written in bright green crayon, at the same eye level as a kindergartner. In a child's handwriting was, "I killed the baby." The first wish. a young man woke up to find his city on fire. He looked down only to find his clothes stained with blood. Just as he began to panic, an old woman appeared before him, eyes milky white and covered in film. She smiled toothlessly down at the young man before asking, "What is your third wish?" "Wish? What wish? And how can I have a third wish without having a second or a first?" The young man was very confused. His heart pounded harder and harder until there was a dull ache in his chest. Instead of answering, the woman continued to laugh and again asked, "What is your third wish?" He looked back towards the burning city and the blood on his clothes. Without thinking it over a moment longer, he said, "I wish I could remember what happened." The woman started laughing again, this time with a dark glint in her eye. "Funny," she said, "considering your second wish was to forget." Do Not Engage, Parts 1 and 2. Stardate 98.3315. Personal log of the First Officer. To all and any who may find this, let this journal be your warning. I don't know how much time I have, but I'm sure this will be my final entry. Get off this planet. You will not survive. We came to this planet some time ago. We were an exploration class vessel, our first voyage even. We landed, and the native species greeted us with open arms. Maybe this should have been our first warning. They seemed friendly, much like us, but then we saw the things they did. Those of us who had made first contact soon found our skin breaking out in hives, those who were lucky anyway. Some ended up losing whole appendages. It was not until the end of our first week that we realised it was because the native fairy's skin secreted a corrosive, one that was not even used as a defensive measure, but rather as a natural function. Upon realising what the natives did, they offered to replace our limbs and other lost appendages. This should have been our second clue. The natives had constructed a means of replacing entire limbs if one was lost. Those of us in the science sector took it upon ourselves to go through their medical histories. We found that in the event that they lost body parts, they could continue living for huge lengths of time. They had been known to go without basic necessities for weeks or months. They even developed surgery long before they developed anesthesia or other numbing medicines. Not to mention their so-called surgery involved cutting themselves open. This wasn't science. This was murder. And not only did they perform it for medical purposes, but some even attempt to do it on themselves for recreation. They do it for fun. After the initial shock, we thought it would be good to take in the local forms of recreation. They choose to garnish their foods with borderline toxic seasonings, and oftentimes feel no effects. They lethally expose themselves to radiation and risk permanent incapacitation to see others perform. And that isn't even to mention the games they play. One involves two natives entering an enclosed arena and repeatedly hurting one another until the timer goes off or one is unconscious. Another involves jumping from a great distance with nothing to break their fall, other than a piece of cloth. But the most horrifying thing that we observed involved the nightly partaking of drinking a highly solvent liquid for the express purpose of making their blood toxic and disrupting normal brain function. At this point, we wanted nothing more than to get off the planet, and had the captain send a request for an escort off the planet. Instead, the capital deemed the planet and its natives too hostile for the rest of the universe, and sent in the military to destroy them. But even with all our firepower and strength, it was a hopeless battle. There was no system of casters, so even when we were able to kill one of their leaders, another simply took its place. Reproducing did not kill them. In fact, a single native could mate hundreds of times in their lifetime. Again, often as recreation, and could reproduce anywhere from 1 to 8 offspring in a single year. They created special weapons when their own natural defences were not enough for long or short distances. When we were driven underground, we attempted to fill the tunnels with toxic gas, only to find that they use it to breathe. We could not outthink them. We could not outfight them. We could not even outlast them. The natives have developed such long lifespans that their greatest weakness were their own bodies deteriorating on them. But even that took years upon years to achieve. I am certain I am the last one of my kind alive on the planet. I can hear them now, those savages. So I write this final entry as a warning to any and all that may come to this planet. Do not come to Earth.